Okay, Jagger, we're going to get started. Okay, good morning, everyone. If you want to come over, take a seat. I'll do a little bit of introductions and get this rolling. So, welcome to the Woody's Rookie Workshop. Thanks to Spenard Builder Supply for hosting this here. Also, thanks to obviously our top sponsors, Alaska National Guard, and of course Woody's, who sponsors and puts this on for us, and XPS and Donlin Gold are all some of our top sponsors, and Rockstar has some beverages here too. So that's all I want to say. I won't go on a long list of all the sponsors that support us today. We're here mostly to talk about gear and safety, which we'll get into after we do some other introductions. So again, my name is Kevin Kastner. I'm the executive director for the Iron Dog, and I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what I think is coming and what the agenda is today, and then we'll sort of hand it off to the next and to the next. There'll be you'll hear me repeat myself many times from now until we start about schedules, agendas, timelines, things like that, so I won't bore you with that at the outset. Okay, so first of all today I'm going to introduce a couple of our board members, and we'll go into the race marshals, and we'll cover sort of a broad spectrum of just sort of general expectations as well as very specific rules and requirements for this year and things that you need to know that you may have already read about, maybe not. And then we'll go into some discussion after that. We'll talk a little bit about GPS and what the rules are for putting the GPS units on your machines. And we'll take a break after that, at which time we'll have lunch and you can visit with some of the other vendors. And we'll pick it back up after lunch with Chris Olds has kindly come to put all of his gear and stuff out so you can check that out. And then Team 9, which is Star and Plum, I believe, they brought a sled, and they'll come in at the end and they'll give you a rookie perspective, so that way you'll get some information about a team who did finish last year, who can give you their perspective of what they thought they learned and experienced. So it's kind of a cool perspective because Chris has been at it so long. For him, it's sort of second nature, but it's nice to have that secondary perspective. Board President, Mr. Jim Wilkie, who can come up and say a few words about the organization and expectations for 2015. Mr. Wilkie.
Hello there. I'm Jim Wilkie. I live here in Anchorage now. I used to live in Nome. And not only am I the board president, but I think I'm board president only because I've been around so long. I've been involved in the Iron Dog since the very beginning, and many of you perhaps don't know the history, so I'll kind of go over that briefly if I can. Back in the late 70s, middle 70s, there were huge cross-country races in the lower 48. The biggest of them all was the Winnipeg-St. Paul that used to start in St. Paul, Minnesota, finished in Winnipeg. They'd alternate some years and go the other direction. But they began to have difficulty with that. Yamaha was a big sponsor, and they were having all the permits. They basically just threw their hands in the air and came to Alaska and said, can you guys, somebody, anybody, organize a big impress the customers out there, improve our product. They had new stuff coming and new phasers and SR5s that they wanted to get out and get demonstrated how tough they were. So they went to the Yamaha dealership here, which was in those days Anchorage Cycle Sales, Bob Kowalski. Bob had some friends in Anchorage, pilots that knew routes, basically knew the area from here out kind of on the other side of the range, but didn't know much on the other side heading north. But we basically went to the USGS, got maps, spread them all over the floor, and started looking for possible routes, knowing that we had to get out of Anchorage, over the pass, and then go somewhere. Really didn't have any idea. The only criteria we had was we wanted to go from Anchorage over the pass and try to find checkpoints, towns, villages, every 100 miles or so. So we looked going to Bethel, looked going to Barrow, looked going to Kotzebue, finally settled on the route that we originally started with, which was basically Big Lake. start the race in McGrath and went from McGrath to Nome that very first year. The race was won by a Polaris team of John Phail and Rod Frank, and we've been running ever since. Over those years, we've changed routes several different times. We used to go Wasilla to Nome. We went Nome to back to Wasilla. We went both ways, and then about 10 years ago, I think 2004, I believe, we settled on the route, which is basically Wasilla, Nome, Fairbanks. But what hasn't changed is it's still the longest and toughest by far race in the world, and it is the biggest challenge and adventure you'll have in your life. It is just a stark contrast in conditions, in people. You'll see everything there is about Alaska in these 4 or 5 days. We don't have really accurate records, but you fellows are going to be in a very small club. There are probably fewer than 500, maybe 600 total racers in the 30-some years that we've been running this race who have completed the event. So there's not very many of them out there. When you get to Nome, or if you're going to Fairbanks, when you get off the finish line, you will become an Iron Dogger. And believe me, that is something to be proud of, because not very many people have done it. You're going to learn a lot about yourself, a lot about Alaska, and a lot about life in general. So with that in mind, Kevin, I'll turn it on over to you.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate the quick overview of the history of the race for those who might not know some of that. At this time, I'll just go ahead and recognize other board members who are here. We have Skip Boomershine is a board member. Of course, Jim, Marianne just came in. Thank you, Marianne. I believe, is that all that are here this morning? Okay, so that's it for our board members this morning. Up next, I'd actually like to introduce, perfect timing. We'd like to introduce Skip Boomershine. He's going to come up and kind of segue a little bit into from sort of history to today and talk a little bit about where we're going, and then we'll introduce our race marshals and get into some of the rules.
Thanks, Kevin. Morning. I'm glad you're all here. One of the biggest things I wanted to address is safety, because safety is huge, not just for your personal well-being, but for the future of the Iron Dog, okay? So one of the things I have to stress to everybody is when you're out on the trail, you don't have the right of way over anyone. You have to lead way to sled dog teams, pedestrians, other recreational snowmobilers on the trail. We don't want any collisions. We don't want any people being run off into the woods. We have to citizenship. For us to be able to run the trail is a privilege. It's not a right. Hinge on how our behavior while we're out there. So we got to make sure we're good citizenship to all the people that live out there year round. So make sure you yield right away to all other trail users while you're out there. I've done it a few times. It's not too hard. You know, those guys are going to stay right down the trail and they're going way slower, so you can just zoom around. If only one had it, what happens if that's the guy that gets hurt? So it also helps you in your private lives. So make sure you got that. I wanted to point that out. And dry clothing. You're all required to take spare clothing. Make sure that you keep it dry in Ziploc bags or however you choose to do that. But we've had several times where people end up having to swim out of situations, and you get all wet out there, and it could be obviously below zero. And if your sled was submerged and you have to pull it back out, then you need dry clothing. Another thing some of the teams do, the two-man teams with the pro class, is they actually store their spare clothing on their partner's sled, just in case they're the one that goes in. They if you can handle it, if you don't have to leave something there. And then the parts, whatever parts that you're comfortable with, again, that's a personal decision. Sat phones, ELTs, somebody else is going to talk about that a little bit more in depth later, but those are absolutely a very good thing. I can tell you that your significant others really appreciate a phone call in the evenings in some of these places that don't have cell service, to let them know you're okay and how things went. Plus, you can get word out if you have a situation that you need support on, whether it's medical or parts or whatever. So those are a great thing to have, a sat phone. And you can rent sat phones for the race from numerous places around town. Talk just a little bit about those lead dog helmet lights. First of all, Steve and Fish have been supporting us in this race and our efforts for many years. So it's just a great idea to give them our business. But one of the things I want to talk about, when you look at the way that helmet light works, it's up high on your helmet. Lots of times you get fresh snow out there. But with that on top of the helmet of the partner in front of you, you can see that. And we've ridden in some horrible blizzards out there, and it's an absolute safety factor. Now here's the other thing. If something goes wrong and you lose your tail light, whether somebody bumps into somebody else or it just quits working, in the rules, a light like that, because it's got a headlight and a brake light, will suffice to get you out. And here's the other thing that we've noticed, and this is personal experience stuff. You're riding in a blizzard, the snow collects on your cowling and covers your headlight. You can't see jack. Those lead dog helmet lights, they're not LED, and it's a good thing they're not. They burn really hot, and so they melt any snow that gets on the lenses, and you can see really good. And then the other thing that happens, like if you're water skipping and you're on the throttle and the skis are in the air, your headlight's pointed in the air, and you can keep that lead dog light pointed at the other bank when you get across. And you can look for reflective markers at night. I just swear by those things, and I just wanted to mention that because I think they're a great way. And if the rules say if you lose a headlight or a tail light, you can utilize that until repairs are made, but it doesn't specify when the repairs are made. So essentially, based on the rules, if you're going northbound, you can fix it in Nome or wait till you get to Fairbanks if you're southbound. And GPSs are awesome. Most of us probably been using them pretty regularly. As rookies, if you don't already have it loaded in your GPS, like I'm talking about breadcrumbs from somebody else that's done it in front of you. I'm not talking about waypoints of the villages. I'm talking about every bit of the trail, okay? If you haven't already got it on there, seek somebody out that's got it on theirs. It's worth, I think I paid like $50 to buy it from somebody and went to his house one evening. The best $50 I ever spent. We got in total whiteout conditions, and there'll be places where you're riding through heavy brush and you break out into a swamp and there's no tracks or no trail anywhere. And so you just kind of hold your course and you get to the other side of the swamp and there's nothing there. There's no holes through the brush, and you start kind of going all around trying to figure out where the trail went. And those GPS breadcrumbs can help you immensely because you'll know that you can, it's over here to the left or wherever, and it guides you right to it, and you don't waste a bunch of time. You don't put stray tracks all over the swamp for the guy behind you to go, what the heck was this guy thinking? So, are there any questions? Do you guys have any questions about safety or anything like that? Yes? Right. That's a good point, Jim. The other thing I wanted to mention to make sure, yes. Right. The service providers on some of the cell phone services around the state, like Verizon and AT&T, they do not work in the villages. They won't even recognize them to come onto their system. So GCI is the most predominant cell phone provider throughout the state and along this trail for sure. So you can go get like a temporary phone pretty darn inexpensive. Jim was saying like $30. I have no idea what the cost is, but to go get one, if that's not who your current cell phone provider is, to go get one from GCI that's going to work for the duration of the race is a really good thing, because in the villages, at least where you're at night, you can call home, touch base. Again, you can do parts or just let your loved ones know you're okay or whatever. But it's don't think you're going to just take any cell phone that works in Anchorage and travel the trail and it's going to work out there. You're going to get a bad surprise. Yeah, you're saying you can do a temporary thing for like 30 days. I know the sat phones, you can rent those. I know Eagle Enterprises is one of the places that you can get those, and there's other places around town. You can rent those for short duration. The difference between those is they'll work anywhere on the trail. So that's probably a good thing. If something bad happens, some undesirable event, and you're stuck out there somewhere, you can phone for parts or assistance or whatever. The other thing I wanted to touch on is these villages, because this is the rookie workshop. One of the places that people get stumped a lot as rookies and trail class riders is going in and out of the villages. So make sure that you got some maps from somebody if you don't have the GPS breadcrumbs. The GPS breadcrumbs are going to save you if you have that on your GPS. You're going to be fine. If you don't have that and you're just trying to navigate your way by stakes that the volunteers put out there and stuff, it can get weird. You can get lost. I've seen several people that went so far the wrong way, when they turned around and came back, they had to go all the way back to the checkpoint to get more fuel, because once they figured out which way the trail went, they'd already burned up so much fuel they wouldn't make it to the next checkpoint. So it can cost you a lot of time. So that's a good thing. But the other thing I wanted to talk about with the village is not just navigating. It's super important. I'm sorry, but you just got to slow down. There's no way you can maintain your out in the wilderness speeds through a village to the fuel pumps. Don't even think about doing that. There's too many things going on out there with the kids. They come running out to see the racers because you're all heroes to them. They want to interact with you and get autographs and touch you and check it out. But you just got to slow down going through the villages, in and out, and know where you're going. So you're not driving all around the village just going, where's the fuel pump? And if you don't know where you're going and you're trying to figure it out and there is somebody walking out there, ask them. They'll be happy to point you in the right direction. I've never heard of anybody getting a bum steer from somebody in the villages. They're great. And if you get any kind of support from the people in those villages, please make sure you compensate them, because this race is everything to us. And it's a whole lot to them too. And the last thing we need is bad feelings from people that live out there. It's unbelievable what they are willing to do for people in racing and riding in the trail class and the Iron Dog, as far as pulling parts off of their sleds and letting you take them. And then when you get back to town, you send them another one. In the meantime, their sled's not running. I mean, those stories, there's tons of those stories. The people in the towns are great to help us out when we need help. So we want to make sure that relationship between the Iron Dog and those villages doesn't get damaged by somebody taking advantage of them or not treating them well. That's about all I got, I think, Kevin. So no more questions? Thanks, you guys. Good luck.
Thank you, Skip. I appreciate that. And I would like to echo that just a little bit. That's one of the things that's really critical, and we've been working on every year to really rebuild and continue to establish a positive relationship with all of the villages, because these are volunteers. I mean, this organization, while it looks really big and impressive and we're doing a lot of cool things this year, I mean, we're technically a two-person staff with one seasonal hire, and then everything else is run by volunteers. So anything we can do and as participants can do to give them a really positive, thank you. I mean, those positive strokes go a long, long way. That they'll continue to help racers and riders coming through, and then they'll continue to help us as an organization just to make this thing possible. So bring cash, be friendly in the villages, I think is a great message. What's the recommendation? About $1,000? Yeah. Yeah, so $500 to $800 is sort of the baseline, but it's nice to have about $1,000 on hand. You never know. You lose a windshield, and I've heard stories like Skip was saying. There's lots of stories out there, but one that I remember was actually McKenna, and I believe it was Ophir. Lost his windshield. It's really cold. Pulls into the village. The guy gives him his windshield. He's like, "Here's $500." Like, thank you very much, and off he went, because you got to have a windshield when it's 40 below. So it's just good to have that handy. It could save you in a pinch if you're in a remote location and somebody's got what you need. That's pretty handy. So good thing to remember. And then concerns, questions, or just clarification. So Lee Davis and Craig Clayton are two of your officials this year. Chris Graber, I don't think, could make it today. So, but these are your race officials.
Hi, I'm Lee Davis. This is Craig Clayton. He started Matsu Vintage and raced basically everything. He races motorcycles, snow machines. He'll be one of the race marshals. Chris Graber from Hatcher Pass. She'll be the other one, and I'm the lead race marshal. Five or 6 years. There are a few changes in the rules this year over what they have been. I don't know if you guys have spent much time in them yet, but one of the things we changed is, of course, you got to have your first aid and CPR card. I think Kevin posted a thing about a opportunity to get that. One of the things that's going to come up this year that hasn't been as big an issue in the past is that everything has gotten compressed so much with the tech inspection being so close to the start, and especially for trail class. You guys are going to have to come to tech with everything ready. In the past, people have had a week to get everything that they didn't have and get it to us. And we're not going to have that time this year. We have so many events going on right day after day after day that if you don't have something, we don't really have time to check it for you. So we expect you to come to tech ready to race. The Anchorage start is a new thing that's going to bring a lot of new challenges. Basically, it's going to be a ceremonial start. It'll be a ceremonial start, so you're not going to be racing. We'll have a set of rules that we'll give to you at the driver's meeting. But basically, it's not going to be any passing. There's going to be a speed limit. There's going to be a maximum time limit. It's going to be exactly like you're racing, except we're not timing you for course time. We're timing you for going too fast. So if the speed limit's 35 and we catch you doing 60, there's going to be consequences. We're going to be running through downtown Anchorage and across. The same rules about towing, working on your sled, those are all going to apply on the ceremonial start. Now, once you get to Birchwood, you're going to be able to load up your sled and take it home. If you have to work on it at home, you can do that. We're not impounding the sled, so there's really no way to monitor whether you guys did work on it or not. So if you need to change your carbides or change your studs or something like that, once you get it home that night, you can. Any questions on that part? Yes? The shooting range, I think, is the plan? Okay. We'll check serial numbers at the starting line. We check them in Nome. We'll check them in Big Lake and at the finish line. So if you don't have your race sled, you're disqualified. There's a change in, we put a definition of a checkpoint for parts. Checkpoint's line aside of the fuel stop, and the rules say you have to get your parts at a checkpoint. So if you have parts in a plane, you have to bring those to the checkpoint. Say, hey, I'm going to replace the ski, and then you can do it. But you have to get your part at a checkpoint. Questions? Yes. A little louder, please. It's not changing. At this point, it hasn't changed. That gives us the opportunity to send someone, an observer, with you to make sure. Yes. Yes, you tell the checker, I'm going to replace the ski. The rules say that you get parts there and you turn your old parts in. That's the plan, yes. My intent isn't to make it take you a long time to give your parts to the checker. Yes. Yeah, if you have your parts, yeah. Just says the parts that you don't have on your sled, you have to get them at a checkpoint. If you carry spare parts, you can change those any old parts. Right. If you break an A-arm and you have one with you and you want to change it out, you can either continue to carry it on your sled until you get to Nome and get rid of it there, or you can give it to the checker. Any other questions? Okay. Fueling. This got changed a few years ago, and it seems to always come up, so I'll go over it real quick. Fueling, at the fuel stop, all you can do is put fuel in. You cannot open your cowling to put oil in. That has to be done a distance away. And I believe it specifies, let me see. Designating fueling area is what they call it. 20 feet. So you can't open your cowling or put oil in within 20 feet of the fueling area. And what you want to do when you come into a checkpoint, if you have time and you want to put oil in first, you can, and then fuel, and then you want to get out. If you haven't put oil in already, you want to get out of the way, so if there's another team coming in, that they can. You don't want to block the fuel pumps while somebody else is coming in, they want to fuel, especially at the start. Squinta does pretty good. They have several setups, but it can get crowded there. Yes. Except Tanana. Ruby and Tanana, you still can use your own. That's the only place you're allowed to get fuel other than a checkpoint, between Ruby and Tanana. No, between Ruby and Tanana. And typically that's the longest stretch we have, 120-something miles. I think that's about all the changes that I have. There is one other thing. We're taking the overland route on the coast. It's always kind of been, well, some years it's kind of sketchy. Last year we had a sled sunk on the coast, so we're specifying the overland route. There's still some discussion going on whether we're going to use the route overland to Walla Walla. It says so in the trail class. It doesn't in the pro class. We'll get you a clarification on that. Any other questions? That is the one that's in the pro class rules. The Snell 2010, we kind of follow ISR rules, and they updated the helmet requirements to Snell 2010, and then there's the European standard, either one of those. So you got to have a Snell 2010 helmet. Got to be orange. Came up a couple years ago. You cannot alter your bib. Can't cut the sponsor's name off. Yes? Okay, yeah, the comment was that sometimes the helmets, it's questionable if it's exactly the right color, if they're 75% orange. The tech inspection's too late to find out it's not right. You can either email us pictures if you have questions about rules. You can email that to the race marshals email that's on the website, and we'll get you an answer back, and then you'll have it in writing that yes, this helmet's good or not. Another thing on your for tech inspection, your sleeping bags, if you can, you want to, if you decide to shrink wrap them, you want to try to put the label out, so when you shrink wrap it, I can read the label. If it doesn't clearly say good to 20 below, you want to bring me something from the internet or from a manufacturer that says this thing is rated to 20 below. Yes? The comment was the bibs are the color swatch we're using for the helmets. We want your bib and the helmet to be close to the same color. And if they're not perfect and you want to ask, send us a picture and we'll let you know if it passes or not. Anything else? All right.
Send an email to racemarshals@irondog.org. It goes to all three of the marshals. They look at the question or the item that you're taking a photo of, and they all talk about that and kind of make a ruling on it. So it's better to do that than it is to try to call the office, because if it's a question about gear, if it's a question about ruling, the first thing everyone in the office is going to tell you, don't call us, contact the race marshals, because at that stage, as far as how this organization works, we do the handoff to that group to make those decisions. We empower that group to, go over the rules and to make judgment calls on what passes for safety, what passes for gear, what passes for, questions about procedures. So I just highly encourage you to do that. And if you don't have that information, We will get it out, and we'll send out more and more emails to you so you can make sure you know how to contact these guys. But do it earlier rather than later is really kind of the point I'm trying to make here.
I did think of one more point. There's only 3 people here that can interpret the rules. That's the race marshals. So you're wasting your time if you ask Kevin about a rule, if you call the office about a rule, if you ask a board member, if you ask the checker. The checkers, we don't ask them to know the rules. We don't ask them to interpret the rules. If you have a question about a rule, you need to ask one of us during the race. We'll have a phone number you can call. All the checkers have phones because they have to call in the times. You can get a hold of us. So if there's ever a question about what you can do and can't do, you have to ask one of the 3 of us.
I agree. All right, so we're going to break this up just a little bit to kind of the monotony of talking heads a little bit. We're going to do a door prize for a gallon of XPS oil, and I think they just drew out of the bucket. Carl? Oh, Charles. Charles. Anna Beanie from Woody's. All right. Mark Pratt. Congratulations. All right. So now I think I'll move on. I'll kind of follow on a little bit what they talked about, the CPR first aid training. There's been some questions coming in. It does apply to all classes. We had some discussion about that. I think basically what happened is there was an oversight in the publication on the trail class that it wasn't listed, although it should have been listed. It's just a good common sense thing to make sure that, you know, if you or your partner or someone is having a problem, if they're on the side of the trail and you're the only one there, you should know how to at least be able to resuscitate someone. And there's been several instances that I can think of, even in my, 4 or 5 years, where that was a critical factor, that someone knew how to help their partner. So it's a good idea. Uh-oh. And and then on CPR and first aid training, if you haven't done it, there's a class coming up actually December 13th, and we'll get this information out to you in an email as well if you haven't seen it yet. But December 13th at the Iron Dog office, it's a Saturday about 10 o'clock in the morning. We're going to do it's $50, and you'll get your first aid and CPR certification that time. And there's some information here for that. Okay, so I'm going to transition a little bit, and I'm going to save some of the schedule of events because I know there's a lot of questions about the order of the day and what's going on and when it's going to happen. So I'll save that for a little bit later, so it's fresh in your mind when you leave. But what I would like to say very quickly about the schedule, pardon me here, the schedule is, like it's been mentioned, is very, very compressed. And you've seen the warnings and the cautions and the emails that we've sent out a few times, but I really want to emphasize how critical it is this year more than ever that read everything we send you when you get your packets, and we're hoping to get those packets before Christmas, which would be a first for us since we've been there. We've been trying, they usually come in January, but we're trying really hard to get that done. Point being is read everything. You know, I jokingly take, it's called the Read and Comprehend document, and I've given it a name over the years. I call it the Glance and Disregard document, because that's what most people do, quite frankly, because it's very evident when we get to tech inspection, we get to other parts of the race, everyone's like, it's a surprise, like, oh, I didn't know that I was supposed to do this. Well, it was in that packet, it was in that document. If you read it, it will save you a lot of grief. And this year, I will be working with the race marshals, and we still maintain the authority to disqualify someone outside of the race marshals. So if you show up unprepared and you're asking for special exception for this, that, and the other, we're going to say sorry this year. So you just need to know that. So be ready, and I'm just trying to caution you as early and as often as I can. So have your stuff together, and if you don't know, call us. I will drop everything that I'm doing to answer your question. So just know that we're not we're not the bad guy. We're not the enemy at the office. You should call us. If there's something we can tell you and help you, we will do it right away, okay? So that's that. I won't preach on that too long. So next up, I'd like to bring up Jake Goodell, and we're going to talk a little bit about the GPS tracking, and we'll repair our signage here too. Thank you. Jake is former rider, racer, and he's volunteered last year with Kent Hamilton to help us with timing, and they did a phenomenal job, not only doing the electronic piece of it, but also doing manual calculations to make sure that we're double and triple checking all of our race times for the pro class. And this year, Jake has offered to help us out, and his wife is also going to volunteer, which we're really grateful for, to make sure that we get the GPS units properly installed in a consistent manner so that they function on every sled at all times. We're also going to look at some other things about getting some in the field, so if we have to do replacements in Galena or replacements in Unilook because something's not working, we're going to try to make that happen this year too. But I'd like to let Jake talk to you a little bit about how he's a good contact. He's going to be your primary guy to make sure that we've got some consistency on GPS mounting locations and our expectations, which are in the rules. And if you guys start getting wise and decide you're going to do something creative, we're going to tell you no, and you'll have to comply with that or it doesn't pass tech inspection. There you go.
So as Kevin mentioned, the GPS units, they're a spot GPS. They're fairly small, about the size of a pilot bread. The mounting locations can vary a little bit from manufacturer to manufacturer, but as small as these are, there's enough real estate behind the dash. That's where most of the riders have been mounting them, that you can get it on there. And you'll be issued a bracket that mounts to your sled, and then we will put the GPSs on your sled at the starting line. At tech inspection, that bracket has to be on there, and it has to be located somewhere where it can see the sky. People have put them before under the hood or in bags and said, oh, they worked all right, but that's not what the rules say, and that's kind of what we're going to maintain. So if it's not mounted at tech, sorry. It needs to be able to see this guy. And like I said, behind the windshield on all 4 manufacturers is a really good place to mount them. As Kevin mentioned, we'll have some in the field. If you have an issue with the GPS, you're not allowed to touch it. Either one of the officials, or in some special circumstances, we've had a checker change them out before. But once they're on there, we'll put a zip tie around it. You shouldn't even notice it's there. They're very light, very inconspicuous. So in Nome, yep, you're not allowed to touch them, basically. In Nome, we've had to charge some of the old ones. I don't think we had to charge these ones last year at all. So unless there's an issue with them, you shouldn't even have to screw with them. As far as contact info goes, if you guys have any questions, get a hold of Kevin. He can get you in touch with me, and I can make sure and answer all those. I guess the whole goal of making these a consistent mounting location is just that. If we have to change one out, we don't inconvenience you guys. It's very quick. I guess that's about it.
Don't forget that there's 2 per team, so you have a built-in redundancy.
Roger.
So if you're switched, we still have the ability to pick up the other one. It's really crucial when we're trying to get back to our sponsors and your family that we can track them, because obviously we don't have TV, we don't have cameras. This is basically the only way to do it to follow it. So it's really important thing.
When you get your racers packets, we're going to try to have those brackets by then. There's a chance that they may come separately, but we usually try to put the race bib, all of the documents that you need to read and understand, any decals, any other required elements for the race, and we try to get your numbers for your windshield and all that other stuff, and the bracket. So ideally, we'll have them in that same package. This year, we're trying to accelerate the packet so you get the bib and the numbers and all that. The bracket may not be available yet. We're still working with those guys. But I apologize, we didn't have one for show and tell. We had loaned one out and it didn't come back. Yeah. So, but we do have brackets, I think. If you're curious, if you want to come by and see one, we do have some of them. We just don't have enough for everybody yet, but we have some that were carried over. But generally, if you haven't seen the spot, the GPS, spot unit, it's really tiny. So you won't even notice it, like he said. So I think that the key is just consistency, so that whether it needs to be swapped out, the last thing we want to do is start rooting around in your bag to try to swap out a GPS unit when you're like trying to get going. So so that, just work with Jake on that, and I'm sure we'll get that figured out. Thanks, Jake. Appreciate it. So any other questions at this time? I know we've kind of we go through a lot of information at this thing. Yes. So to emphasize that, Jim was commenting that the bib should be, unaltered. Don't mess with it. This is not a big problem anymore because the penalty was pretty heavily applied the year that someone decided to get wise with their bib. So we don't have a lot of infractions now. But just make sure there's room, because it's true. People do embroider names and other things on the back of their coats. I believe the bibs are about 13 inches by 13 inches square. So just make sure you leave yourself some room to fix those to the back of your coats. So at this time, we'll do one more. Let's do one more door prize before we kind of transition here a little bit. Do we have someone to draw? Okay. Oh, sweatpants. Awesome. Iron Dog sweatpants. John Schaefer? Congratulations, your Iron Dog sweatpants. Okay, so we're actually kind of ahead of schedule. We've been breezing through. What I'm going to do then is take the time that I was going to do later and walk you through the schedule very quickly, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A, and we'll do some more follow-up. And if you've got some, yes, sir. Sure. Mr. Boomershine would like to add one thing. Hold on.
Thanks, Kevin. It's something I forgot to mention, and it's so dang important. I just felt like I better get back up here. When we talk about the Iron Dog, there's 4 equally elements that make up this race, and the race cannot happen if you removed any one of the 4. The 4 elements are the racers, the fans, the sponsors, and the volunteers. And the biggest thing I wanted to stress with you guys, when you go through those checkpoints, you absolutely have to treat the volunteers with respect and show your appreciation and gratitude for what they do. So many of those people live out there, and they come out all hours of the night to fuel sleds and to greet you when you come in. When you're in trouble, they help you. So make sure that you show your appreciation for them and gratitude, honor them, and treat them with the utmost respect. And the other thing is, when you do get your race packets, there's going to be a bunch of sponsor stickers in there. These are the monetary sponsors and the in-kind sponsors for this race. Those stickers are not optional. They're required to be displayed on your sleds in plain sight, plain visibility, to show our appreciation for their contributions to us being able to hold this race. So I just wanted to point those things out. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Skip. And that's a good point. We had a little sidebar a minute ago about sponsors, and not just Iron Dog sponsors, but your own. Highly recommend, if you haven't done it already, and several teams are doing it, set up a Facebook page, do some updates about your build, talk about what you're doing, share that with everyone. It's really, really appreciated, and the fans grow exponentially, not only for us, but for you as well, and your sponsors who are investing in you. They're getting some return that people are paying attention to what they're doing for you and how they're helping you with your build, helping you with your gear, et cetera. So great suggestion just to kind of pay attention to those. And he's absolutely right. Skip is right on the money when it comes to the balancing act. I know there's things we do for racers that are very frustrating, and they're like, why are we doing this? This is really irritating. And we try to be sensitive to that. Sometimes that's a balancing towards the sponsor because they're looking for something. Sometimes we push back on the sponsors, likewise saying, hey, we can't have these guys jump through any more hoops. So it's a balancing act. And one thing I would like to emphasize that we haven't yet is you can contact me at any time and tell me what you don't like and you can tell me what you do like, and I would highly appreciate that. Often what happens, this is very, very common, is that you'll go through this whole process, you'll get to the end, and you'll get to the other side of it, and then we just get a, sort of negative thing here or there, pockets of it, but I don't hear about it other than like third or fourth hand. If you just come to us and just say, hey, this really didn't work, I'm not happy with that, we'll work on that. We'll try to find a way to adjust it for you. So I highly encourage you to be vocal. You don't have to be angry, I hope, but but you can be vocal with me. That's what we're here for, is to try to adjust this and make it better. And so, this year especially, we're doing a lot of new and interesting things. Some of which may not work. But we've got to try to grow and adapt and evolve. And where we fail, we'll work on that the next time around. So. And I'm sure Chris will cover a lot of the gear and things like that as well. So to just emphasize, and for those of you who are watching on the internet, what Jim is saying is re-emphasizing the social media component. The manufacturers and the sponsors really appreciate the unique content that racers provide beyond what we can do with broadcast, and we can only be in so many places, and we can't certainly be in everyone's shop and in everyone's training run, but that's really cool and interesting stuff that benefits your sponsors as well. And I would echo, it's not just Polaris. I mean, BRP and Arctic Cat and Yamaha, everybody's really putting a lot more into this. It's been really nice to see sort of steady increase in involvement, and so whatever we can do collectively to give them great feedback and give them great content, I think is very smart. Okay, so I know we're rambling and rattling on, but I do want to go over the schedule since we have the time for that, and then I'll field, because I'm sure there's a host of questions on what's going on, so we'll spend some time and do that now because it's too early to break for lunch. So the very first event coming up on this new 10-day compressed schedule is going to be the Donlin Gold Iron Dog Safety Expo and your tech inspection, which will take place on February 18th. That's a Wednesday. So I'll walk you through that day a little bit, and then we'll work to the next event. How that event is planned to go down right now, and we've still got a little bit of scouting, so there may be some fine-tuning, and we'll continue to update you via email, and it'll come in your read and comprehend in your packet when we send that out. Here's what we expect will happen. For the trail class, we'll do a move-in in the morning, approximately 7:30 to 8 in the morning. We're going to do a move into their warehouse. They're going to cordon off a whole area for that tech inspection to take place with tables, so you can bring your gear and your sleds and all that stuff in. And we're going to do the trail class. Is going to be our first priority. Get it done, get you processed, get you through the tech inspection, and then you're going to be released for the day. You have the option, if you want, if you're interested in doing show and tell, which is perfectly acceptable. The only issue is we don't have room inside the retail store for all of the sleds, so the pro class is going to get priority in store. But if you're interested in putting the sleds right out front on the entryway for show and tell that day, you're more than welcome to. We would love it. It would make a great visual, but we're not going to require that of you. So if you're done and you want to do your tech inspection and you've had as much fun as you want to have, you're more than welcome to leave. But if you want to stick around and have stuff on display when people come later in the day, you're more than welcome to do that. So that's the trail class experience for the tech inspection, and that will happen at Cabela's in South Anchorage. And for the pro class, how that day will go down, in the morning, your priority will be just your snow machine. So we're going to take your snow machines. We're going to have areas marked throughout the retail store. We'll know. We're going to be set up the night before, so we're not worrying about setting up our gear. We're going to be focused on helping the pro class riders and racers when you show up. Unload your sleds at the warehouse entry. We'll have dollies. The only thing you're going to need to bring is you need the dollies, like garage dollies, because we don't want to tear up the retail store by dropping studs on the concrete. So everyone needs to bring dollies for the day. What we'll do is we'll move you in, we'll get you in position, drop your sleds, and at that point we'll start doing just your snow machine tech. So there may be some gear on your machine, that's fine. We're going to, while the trail class is being done, focusing on them, we're going to have a sort of a satellite team that's going to start working on all the sleds on the showroom floor. So we'll start getting some of that done. Once the trail class wraps up, the rest of the tech inspection will come in, and we're going to very quickly finish off your tech inspection on the showroom floor. You'll then, now that the trail class is moved, the gear, we'll get you in the garage, we'll check all your equipment, all your safety equipment and your gear. Then you can put that back in your bag and put it back in your truck, and you'll be done. And we'll release you at that time. If you want to take off, after that, you'll have the mandatory driver's meeting with the race marshals, who will go over all the latest and greatest in what's going on, what you need to know, trail conditions, etc. And I expect that'll be around 3 p.m. And after that, we do the dog and pony show. So that's where the show and tell begins. That's what's being promoted with like live radio, lots of promotion to get the public to come in and meet you from 4 to 8. So then your sleds are still on the floor. People come in, you're hanging out by your sled, you're signing autographs, you're talking to people, you're showing them your sled, you're talking about what the Iron Dog is all about, and that's what that looks like. So it's a very long day, and I apologize in advance, but we're going to try to give you a break in the middle of the day so you can kind of get away. You don't have to be stuck in that retail store all day long. And we'll have volunteers and other folks around, and I expect most people bring someone else with them. So if you're worried about your snow machine, leave a friend. We'll also have volunteers keeping an eye on everybody's stuff. And that's the big reason for space, and also we don't want your gear intermingled with other stuff, is why we're separating the gear into the warehouse for that. So any questions on the tech inspection the safety expo? No questions? Okay. So we'll get you detailed move-in instructions and what time and where and all that via email and also in your packet. So next, very next night, so now Thursday night, we're going to do the Racers Draw Hall of Fame banquet. That'll take place at the Marriott, which it did, the same place we did last year. So if you were involved last year, that's the Marriott Hotel downtown. We have the whole gold room or whatever they call it there, their big banquet hall. And that kicks off about 6 p.m., just for cocktails, whatever, and we'll get started with dinner, and we'll do the Hall of Fame, and we'll draw starting positions that night. Any questions on that? That one's pretty straightforward. One point to note on that: every racer and rider does receive a banquet ticket, so you already have a pass. Okay, so we already expect you to come, and you already have a pass. There's no additional charge. If you're bringing a spouse or, friend or other family members or, sponsor or whatever, I believe those tickets are they $65? I think they're $65 for a banquet ticket. So, and the way the tables work is you have to buy all 10. So, for example, let's say you have two pros, that takes care of 2 seats. You have to buy the 8 if you want the whole table to be reserved. If you just buy 4, we're just going to put you sort of generally together. You'll have to find your own position. So call the office. They can walk you through the details. Laurel is definitely good at helping you with that. So any questions on the banquet, the draw, Thursday night? Okay, moving on. So Friday, this is where it starts to get interesting. Friday, the trail class, we want to have you out there ready to roll, departing at 10 a.m. That's the goal. We're going to dress it up. We'll put flags and inflatables, and we'll have a PA and someone to do the announcements and introduce you, kind of give you a good send-off. And that will happen at Big Lake, same location. If you're not familiar, we'll do it out Southport Marina, out there by Big Lake Power Sports. Same kind of setup that you've been seeing if you've ever been out there before. So nothing's really changed for that. And we'd like to get everybody out, start moving people by 10 a.m. So don't show up at 11. It's just kind of, it's kind of irritating to us because we have to move on because that's the next thing we have to do is do the rest of the build and the rest of the setup for the pro start for Sunday. So come early when we'll send you on your way and wish you well. And I'm sure there'll be race marshals there and everyone will be there to send you off. So that's the order of the day Friday. That's the 20th of February. Then that evening, one of the new events that we're doing is we're kicking off that Flying Iron Freestyle Show. We're bringing up a couple of X Games guys, and Corey Davis will actually be doing the freestyle show the Friday night before the ceremonial stuff downtown, and that's downtown Anchorage. So for those in the trail class, sorry, you'll miss that. And that happens from about 7 to 9 p.m., and that's kind of, I'll leave it at that. Unless there's any questions on trail class start. Any questions? Okay. So moving on to the Saturday morning, that one for pro is going to be, again, a highly orchestrated and challenging thing. We've got quite a few parking places set up. We intend to have you basically pull in the morning. We'll send you a load schedule. You'll unload your equipment and yourself, and you'll be set up on 4th Avenue. And you're basically there from the time you drop off until the time. We don't have enough room in all the side roads to keep your vehicles nearby. So we're going to come up with a system of either shuttles or other ways to make sure you have a way to get back there. If we have to do a drop off and come back, we'll make sure we can get you downtown. We'll make sure there's a place for hospitality. There'll be a place to warm up and get away from the public a little bit. So, if you need to just kind of remove yourself a little bit, we'll make sure there's a place that you can hide out for a period of time. Just, we don't want you just standing out there for 2 hours just kind of with your hands in your pockets looking around. We'll try to give you a way to get out of there and, make sure there's a restroom and water and all the kind of things you need to just make it through a couple hours that morning. So we'll move you in early, and then the first thing will happen is actually the Matsu Vintage. Craig Clayton is also involved with the Matsu Vintage Racers. They're going to have a little shine and show, and they'll do a parade up 4th Avenue and back down to First via E Street, and they'll do a little thing from about 10:30 to 11:30ish, and then we'll start working into the ceremonial start. So this is all your announcements and national anthem and all of that. And our intention is to send the pro class out at 12 noon. So the first team out, and then we'll go on a TV schedule because we'll have the live broadcast going. So there'll be like 2 minutes and 3 minute intervals based on whatever we end up working out with the broadcast. After that, you guys will traverse, and we, if you haven't seen it yet, some of this map stuff will start coming out, and you'll get more details. Past the Hilton, behind the Saturday Market parking lot, down to First Avenue, which is right there at Odom Corporation and the railroad. You'll go across the Ship Creek area. You'll enter the Port of Anchorage. You'll go across the backside of the Port of Anchorage. You'll enter J-Bear, and you'll traverse the entirety of J-Bear. And there'll be soldiers watching at a couple of different viewing spots on base. And then you'll come out the back end, and your terminus will be at the Birchwood Recreational Shooting Park, a.k.a. Isaac Walton, for those who know. And that will be where you stop. So it's about 28 miles based on initial estimates. We're going to do a lot more scouting and get very, very particular and specific so we know the time, distance, and requirements that the marshals will give you. So it's about 27 miles. And the guys at the shooting park are going to give us the whole thing. They're really excited to have you guys finish there. So there'll be plenty of room for trailers and getting everything picked up. And to reiterate, you'll be allowed to take your stuff home. Make sure you're ready for a race day on Sunday. So that's what Saturday looks like. And then you guys don't care as much, but the rest of the day, there's the Iron Pup will follow you, and then we do another freestyle show that evening or that afternoon. So that's what happens downtown. Any questions on downtown? None? Okay, good. I know you guys are getting restless. So I tell you what, let's see, I'll just finish off the Sunday, and then we'll take a little break so you guys can get up and move around. Sunday, basically very similar to what we've been doing all along. We're still planning to, all the fence and all the signage and all the stuff. We've got to move all that from Anchorage to Big Lake the very next day. We'll get that set up for a start, and we're planning to start you earlier than we have the last few years. We're going to try to get you out of there by 10 a.m. And the advantage of that, for those who haven't run, the advantage of getting out at 10 a.m. is you're going to have more daylight, which you'll appreciate when you're trying to get to McGrath that day. So the move-in will be just a little bit earlier, but we're going to try to get you out of there. We'll still have the same 2-minute interval releases. We'll still do all the announcements, and there'll still be a start at Big Lake. So it won't be scaled down to just orange fence and nothing. We're actually still going to have a start at Big Lake. So any questions on Big Lake? And again, we'll send you details on move-in. Okay, well, I tell you what, let's take a 5-minute break, get up, stretch around. You can use the restroom, go around the cameras. Oh, we'll do one more door prize. Oh, this is a big one. You don't want to miss this one. Which is kind of handy. Let's see who they drew. Dave Tillett. Dave Tillett, congratulations on your Woody's traction package. All right, let's take a 5-minute break. We'll call you back. Thank you much.